So when I say embodiment, I mean uh dropping into your body. Most people walk around living only in their head and kind of just like dragging their body along with them. I mean um being in the present moment by embodiment could be breath work, it could be exercise, any sort of way for you to like do sort of a body scan and be living in your vessel. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, you're so from what I'm getting from it, it's kind of being present in the sense that you're not, even though you're walking around and actually talking and interacting with people, being present in the sense that you're not just stuck in your head over analyzing things and just kind of thinking too much and being in your own way or whatever. I think that ties into what we've been talking about with staying present. And so for me, embodiment in that sense means learning more about who I am so that I can just be myself or whatever. And as I do that, that helps me naturally quiet down my mental chatter. I know it works differently for everybody, but for me, I get to slow myself down. And for me, it's kind of natural right now. That's like kind of where I've been operating, but that's just the last year or two. Like I come from the space of over analyzing and like kind of being a slight perfectionist in ways. And so I would get annoyed and just kind of irritated with people really quickly back then because I was so over analytical. And now I've been able to relax out of that and embody myself. That's kind of what it means to me.
I'm sort of right now viewing it as sort of like a way of being. So you would obviously, uh how would you call this? What am I doing with my hands right now? Like stretching, like feeling into it, sort of, and like sometimes extending, kind of like pushing into it. I don't know how to describe it. I do this sometimes in the morning when I remember to, like, if I meditated. I sometimes remember to do this in the shower, like when I'm doing cold therapy. I'll make it a little colder water, and then I'll kind of like press into my feet and like kind of like um make my legs be very stiff so that I'm like feeling my legs. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm sort of like stretching into myself and sinking into my body. And that way I can actually listen to the intuitive messages that my gut and my heart and my brain are sending me, rather than just be stuck in my inner narrative, like stuck in my own head. And like I'm saying, a lot of people are kind of like balloons, just like kind of floating along just in their head. Whereas like uh there's so much joy and vitality in just being as much in your body as you can. And the paradox of it all is you don't really, unless you're like a health conscious, like super active athletic person, you exercise a lot and all those things, you don't really see the value, or at least I never did, in being embodied. You think with your brain, like you identify as your mind. So there was never really any point until I became spiritual, until I realized that like this vessel isn't me, but I am stuck with it. So I might as well really embrace that. What does that run-on sentence make you think of?
Easy. It sounds like you are operating more from your heart. A lot of people would be like, "Oh, you're operating with intention through your heart chakra." To make it sound all mystical and magical. I was never huge into the concept of chakras, although I resonated with it and I thought it was a beautiful idea when I was younger. Back then, all of that stuff I would think of, all of the new age tools I would think of, okay, people use these as a kind of placebo effect, right? And it's like just a permission slip for them to think that they're having an effect. Yeah, and in that way, they can cultivate an experience based on the ideas that they think they're getting from these items. However, my revelation in science has been, it's flipped my whole interpretation of it being a placebo on its head. Now that I've been so into the physics thing and into the chemistry for years now, I've learned like there's actually a whole bunch of science with that stuff. And it turns out, specifically with the chakras, I'll get to crystals next, But with the chakras, these are like kind of ancient maps for the body, right? And so it helps, I guess, medicine practitioners focus on certain pressure points and certain places in the body that are part of the circuit. But what they learned over time is that there's many, many different kinds of circuits within our bodies, right? Not just our veins and circulatory system, but there's a sugar system. There's a system of drugs, dopamine, serotonin. There's many different systems and energy systems within us. But so what my revelation in science has been, as I got into studying medicine the last 5 years, is that the chakras correlate with a ton of different circulatory systems in our body that are physical. It's undeniable science. You can study these things, you can do tests with them. But my whole question there is, because we live in this consciousness matrix, is that something we created? Is that something that wouldn't have necessarily been an interpretation for us as humans if we hadn't created it? I think it's kind of this thing where we created it with our imagination, but our imagination is kind of who we are. So it became real as the collective consciousness decided this is a real thing. So we can create this reality where this is actually real and not just a foo-foo idea, basically. So that's what I'm trying to ask myself and ask history. Is this a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or from another angle, is it that the early practitioners kind of channeled this information, downloaded this information from within themselves, because it just is kind of our construct? Now that's the chakras. So there's multiple interpretations, and I don't remember the numbers, but just for some kind of relative perspective here, there's multiple systems. Some are studied, I think, in 6 or 7 chakras, and others are studied in the terms of 12 or 15 chakras. I could have the numbers wrong, but that's the general relation. There are a simpler version and then a more extended version, but they all kind of address the similar ideas, just split differently, a different layering of the onion. So I think, though, just to wrap that idea up, in 100 years, the chakras will be respected in medicine, in all schools, and not just in Eastern philosophy, but just medicine in general. And I think that there will probably be a new name for them by that point, because there's so much baggage around the spiritual idea of chakras. I think there will be a new medical term for that once we get our better perspective. Now, for the crystals, I was convinced these were just placebo. These are just rock and placebo. I don't understand why I had that perspective, though, because even then, when I thought that, even then I knew crystals are what are inside of our computers. Crystals are like, lithium and quartz. These are the things that hold the information that make our computers work, and why they can work so much quicker over time. And so knowing that, I don't know why I wouldn't have understood, like, these things are very energetic and they can be used in a variety of ways. But so the understanding that I now have with crystals, because I'm a chemist and that's the lifeblood of my work, working with crystals, now I understand crystals have memory. They retain information. And just like we're talking about with the water experiments, they react to stimuli. And so I very much believe now that I was kind of onto something with the placebo effect, but that's just for anything in life, right? You can use anything there, but physically, crystals retain information, and this ties into our intention, because you can choose what kind of information to store in a crystal. That's how we make computers. That's literally how we design them. So now I understand about both of those ideas. I thought they were just kind of cute and spiritually cool and fun ideas to play with. But no, these are, again, science and physics. And that's the kind of shit that, bro, it's blowing my mind. So we can go all day about that.
It's blowing my mind just hearing about it. So why'd I even bring that up? Why was that the first thing to bubble up for me to write it down? Besides it, and I guess another way of saying how it gets you in the present moment is breath work leads to embodiment, leads to the flow state, which is, I can only speak for you and myself because we're on the same wavelength. Flow state is really all I'm concerned with these days. That's really all I'm trying to tap into is flow state. Novelty.
Novelty. That's an exciting word for me because some of the research that I've been into lately is the science of novel tryptamines, just basically newer classes of tryptamines like LSD, like stuff, or my bad, like DMT like stuff, and so the just that's just the correlation with me mentally with the novel tryptamines that I've been into. But novelty in the sense of like new to you, or yeah, exciting. It's kind of exciting. So I've been tapping into that love for novel experience because I used to be kind of closed off to myself, and I realized that I have many moments in life where I become a hermit, and I kind of it's not that I actively am like pushing people away. It's just that I get so comfortable in my space that I just can't be bothered, you know? And I find now, though, what's really helping me out is reminding myself in the mornings, today can be a novel experience in ways that I don't even know, in ways that I couldn't even think about. Like, right, exactly. And as I remind myself of that, dude, I wake up today and you hit me up and we go and we have, even though we kind of planned this, I didn't know it would be today at that moment, just living in my moment, not thinking. But go even just the simple act of going to a different grocery store today, that was novel for me. And I was excited. I had Oh, and you're right, because Trader Joe's is like they're always in flux. It's not like at other grocery stores where they have their brands and they stick with their brands. Like Trader Joe's is always introducing new stuff and rotating. Yeah, and they work with smaller businesses, which is why that is the way it is. But it was, just to wrap that up, it was really exciting for me, and that is something that I've been carrying with myself since I met you. Actually, it comes from my breakup with my last girlfriend, where I told myself that I need to be by myself in terms of dating. I need to be with myself and learn more about myself. And as I got into that, I became kind of a hermit, and I was also really hurt in various ways, and not even all of that hurt was like attached to that relationship, but it was stuff that I put under my skin, under the surface, and I had to look at. And so I realized last summer before we met, I was like, I need to do some new I just need to expose myself to new energies and new frequencies. And it was literally like 2 days later I met you. But what's funny is, so I'm telling myself I need to shake myself loose and get flexible by doing new things. And then like the next day I'm like, well, I also need some new friends, because I love my friends, but they're not really available right now emotionally and even physically to hang out with. And so I was like telling myself I need a new friend, or not a new friend, but I need new friends. And literally the next day is when you pulled up and you're like, hey, you want to ride? And something in me was like, you can trust this person. Like something in me was like, nothing. I had no fear about, is this person someone that I need to be, anything like that? No, I just kind of could feel like, I got the sense like you might be a skateboarder or whatever, and you're just like, you want to ride? And so, dude, that was another one of those moments like that we experienced with the shopping cart, where I kind of was like, will you bring me something, universe? And you pulled right up on me in the least expecting moment. And that was a hot day where I was like walking and tired, and like I kind of needed that little bit of a ride, even though it's 2 blocks or whatever. Exactly. I was gonna say. Yeah, no. So that's a kind of long-winded answer, but
that's really cool to know that, and especially knowing you now, like I know you now, your it was a little out of character for you to accept a ride from a stranger when you're that close to home. When I think of novelty, when I look at other species and I also look at this species that we're in, it seems like that's kind of what the natural yearning of the universe is for. That's like speaking through us. Like, it kind of seems like we're here for novelty. Like, we're here for novelty's sake. We're here to experience novelty. And if you notice, for example, both of us cohabitate with cats. You could buy them, like, you could go on Amazon or Etsy and get them some cutesy overpriced like boutique cat toys. Or you could go to Wendy's and crumple up your foil, and it's a brand new, shiny, crinkly ball for them, and they're obsessed with it. I could be eating pistachios, and they want to play football with it. Like, they love anything new and novel, and if you've had something around for a while, they're desensitized and they don't give a fuck about it. But whenever something's brand new, they go ape shit, and we kind of do the same. Whether it's relationships, whether it's a new like vice, whether it's a new pastime, like a lot of people have the personality where when they get into something, they get really fucking into it, and I think that is novelty, and I think that keeps life fresh.
So somebody I was talking to lately, or maybe I was listening to another podcast or something, but so somebody was exploring the idea that with this novelty thing, that they think that the whole simulation of being a human is kind of based on that, because like as a consciousness, as a primordial consciousness that we all come from, let's call it the one or the source. Well, so when you're in that form of consciousness and you become one with all that is, it doesn't actually have you don't have the opportunity for these human experiences, right? For this fracturing of consciousness and to be a million different people, right? And so what they were describing, whoever this was that I was listening to, was the idea that consciousness wants novelty. It's so bad. Like the state of being that we are, coming from the one, the source, it wants novelty so bad that that's why it created this multiverse and all of these different avatars. And not only did it create all of these avatars and worlds and different galaxies, but it also created the opportunity for us to have free will as these things and change and rotate and transform into other versions of ourselves, other novel versions of ourselves, and then so learn more and more and more and more and more about ourselves infinitely for all of time, because time is only as long as we make it.
I feel like that's also reflective of biodiversity and expansion in nature. My next thing I wrote down was ritual, the concept of ritual or rituals in your life.
I'm not a big ritual person. I haven't been since I was a kid. I feel like kids are just kind of naturally ritualistic. They find the things that work for them and they do them, whether that means like chewing gum while you're riding your bike. There are certain little things that kids do in combination that they really like to do. For me, it was I'm not speaking out of superstition just because they like to do it. It's because they enjoy doing it. For me as a kid, to kind of relay this idea, so some of my rituals would have to be tied around, I guess, playing with my friends. I had one of my ones that I can remember is that before I would like go outside to play, I would think about what games or activity do I want to do today and what friends do I want to include. So one of my rituals when I would go out to play as a kid was I would first knock on the doors of those friends that I wanted to do certain things with. Like I would kind of come up with an idea and then see if I could make that happen. Like I want to go to the woods with my friend Jared and my friend Dennis. So I'd go and I'd knock on their door first and ask their mom, like, can they come out and can we play? And then eventually once I got them together, I'd be like, do you guys want to go to the woods? And that little ritual of just forming an idea is something I did a lot playfully as a kid. These days I don't really do things ritualistically outside of, I guess, my arts, like my music, my visual art. There are rituals I do, but that's just kind of the groundwork, the framework that I work out of. And plenty of times I treat that like an Etch-a-Sketch where I get rid of it all and I come with a new approach. But so I had an interesting DMT trip last night, and it talked with me about ritual, and it let me know, like, you're really flexible these days, because the things you used to have to do with, specifically with smoking DMT, like I did used to have a ritual and how I had to get it all going. Now I have some kind of guidelines that I use because I know how to get the most out of my experience, but it's not a ritual that I like need to adhere to. There's nothing that I feel like I missed if I don't do the guidelines. But basically in my trip, it was letting me know, it was asking me, the experience of being in there with ayahuasca, DMT energies, it was asking me, are those old rituals that we used to go through together, are they important to you anymore? And I realized they were important to me in the moment. They really helped me. Now, I don't need them. I can let go of them. And then it went even further to asking me, are you interested in maybe developing a new ritual? And I answered, not so much. I am interested in this energy where you're asking me and you're reflecting to me and we're able to talk. And I'm just talking about the energy of ayahuasca itself. Oh. Hey guys. She was chilling and he just walked up and started. But yeah, no, just to wrap it up, my ritual, for me personally, rituals aren't a big part of my life anymore. And they used to be massive. Like every time I would record, my ritual would probably be to smoke a blunt and then halfway through the song, light up another blunt. A lot of my rituals were around weed, now that I remember that. And the same applies for my drinking in my early 20s. I was a drinker, a serious alcoholic. So my rituals, R.I.P. CJ, because the one that I just remembered first ties to his death. I had a little series of weekends, months, maybe for a few months, where I had this ritual. I didn't love cigarettes at this time in my life. It just wasn't a part of my life like that. But smoking a cigarette would bring me closer to CJ. He loved smoking Marlboro Reds. And so I had this ritual where on like a Friday or Saturday night where I didn't have friends around me, because usually things were busy for me in my early 20s. I had people that I lived with, so people were constantly around me in my space, just kind of there to hang out with. But if I found myself alone on the weekend, I would make the most of it by going to buy a fifth of Jameson whiskey. And my thing was I'd usually drink anywhere from a quarter to half of that fifth. And the ritual was I would go outside once I had a nice buzz. I'd smoke a cigarette as I drank some whiskey, and I'd reflect on how much I miss my friend and just kind of talk to him. And also talk to the universe and myself and check in with where I am. Because that death it did a whole number on me and was hard to deal with as like a 19-year-old. I think I was 19 when that happened. And so my ritual was just Jameson, cigarettes, and then a big blunt to kind of knock myself out. Because when you're that drunk, that weed just kind of puts you down. And so that was one of my adult rituals. And that I have fond memories about that, even though I kind of was using drinking as a coping mechanism. I have really fond memories of just being shitty drunk, smoking cigarettes that I didn't necessarily even enjoy that much, but communing with my friend, who at that time I felt was very much dead, because I didn't have the relationship I have now where I understand death as life, more life in a different form or whatever. So that's one of my memories in rituals.
So speaking on ritualing, I guess the DMT is going to speak through me now and ask you again, just nag you a little bit. Do you find any value in ritualizing aspects of your life that are pre-existing, such as you can use weed as a distraction, you can use it as a way to numb yourself, you can use it as a way to cope, and we've all been there and we've all found that that's not sustainable for any long time. But I found a way to practice using weed mindfully or more mindfully is if I do ritualize it. If I do not to do it just to do it, but like, you know, whenever you buy yourself like some like tea leaves, like that you're gonna like fresh tea, and you smell it, you like inhale it and really like appreciate the scent of it, the flowers, like doing that with your weed before you grind it, before you pack it, and just being very present while you're smoking. I find that I get more out of it in a lot of ways, and I get more present before I smoke, because a lot of times you reach for the pipe or whatever the vice is to distract yourself from how you're feeling already. But if I check in with myself before I smoke, then I have a much cleaner, much more like a much more sensational high rather than a numb high, if that makes sense. And so I think like ritualizing skateboarding, what like how you already do skateboarding, but like viewing it in with the filter on of it being a ritual, like how you stretch beforehand, how you like warm up, like these are these are all ways you can you can ritualize anything. You can ritualize whenever you're preparing food for yourself. Like you set intention whenever you're preparing that food, and you make it with love. Like that can be its own ritual. So do you see how you can already take things that serve you and turning them into a ritual? Do you think that would make you maybe appreciate them more, or is that just what I'm finding for myself? Can you relate to that?
So yeah, to me, to kind of wrap that up, it sounds like we're doing the same thing, but you're just adding an extra step. Basically, we're both setting the intention, and that's what I find is all I need is just that intention, and that's why I've been able to drop my rituals that were tied to everything. But to talk about the tea leaves was interesting that you noted that, because one of my rituals from my days of being a severe alcoholic was that, so I'd have serious hangovers that lasted a day or two, and one of my rituals for getting through those hangovers would be to make some very strong hot green tea, and to slam you when you make green tea, you let it cool down to like room temperature and you slam it all at once. That's like the way you drink green tea to get better. And so my ritual would just be like, if I was shitty and hungover the next day, I'd spend the day watching Netflix, smoking weed, and drinking green tea, and that was just kind of one of my ways back. But yeah, I'd say that we're doing the same thing with the intentions, setting those intentions, and that gives us some real-time richness and reflection in our experience, real time right there. But yeah, I've been able to drop my rituals just because they're not so necessary for me, and I don't really get a whole lot out of them like I used to, because I did used to get a lot out of the ritual, and especially with the weed rituals, because I was such a blunt smoker. Blunts were my ritual in relation to recording, in relation to doing a visual artwork, in relation to watching TV. So like I really ritualized my weed smoking over and over again. And so I guess maybe I just don't need it because it's so ingrained that I moved past that, and I don't really miss it. I don't look for it, and I'm sure in the future I will have more rituals that just kind of create themselves. But for me right now, it's not so conscious with the ritual. It's more consciousness in my intention in the moment right now.
I guess I'm finding them a nice addition to having a strong foundation with like mental stability, because you can turn a morning routine into a ritual that helps you adhere to it, and it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like self-care. The next thing that I wrote down is a concept I've heard mentioned a couple times, probably through a podcast, realistically. You're familiar with the name of God in the Old Testament, Yahweh? So it, I guess apparently some ancient Jews believed that, and I'm probably getting this wrong, that Yahweh, you know how they also, when they ask God who he is in the Bible, that he just says, I am. So he's amness, he is isness. Yeah, he is existence. So, or she, or they, or whatever. But Yahweh, listen to this. So it is the inhale and the exhale. It is the breath. So God is the breath. So are you familiar with that? Hearing that Yahweh is just the sound that a breath makes.
I think I may have heard it once.
Okay, what do you think of that? I think it's pretty interesting. If there's any actual weight to it besides conspiratorial.
I'd say there's just as much weight to that idea as there is weight to the idea of the from which existence springs, or physical reality kind of springs. My friend had a rough moment in his trip yesterday, and he used that to kind of center himself and ground himself, and he was so kind of lost in his peaking that I said, "Oh, the earth's on me, that's nice," and he was like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. But he was just kind of using it to ground himself in his kind of his ocean of psychedelia that he was in. But yeah, I'd say there's just as much weight to that as there is to any of these concepts, because what I'm realizing in the studying of physics is these things can be as real as we decide them to be, and we can get as much effect as we decide to. And I'm still working to understand the mechanism of it all, but now I'm learning that it's not just placebo. It's not just that we kind of use this placebo effect, but there also is an energetic input and output there, and it's all tying into our intention, right? But yeah, no, I think that those ideas are cool. And there's a million words like that for God that they all kind of naturally come from either human sounds or sounds in nature. And I think they're all valid ideas.
So I'm sure you've had this happen. This is something that I've noticed maybe only in the past couple years. Like whenever whenever I'm really sticking with my daily practice of like a sitting meditation, whenever you exhale, has this happened to you? Does this happen to you? Like whenever you exhale, sometimes it'll naturally create like a humming or like kind of like a esque sound. Like let me see if I can do it. You do that and your lips kind of vibrate a little bit. Like, does that ever happen to you? Because I found that that's really relaxing.
So this is very funny, again, because of the trip I had last night and the parallels here. A huge part of my breathing last night, I had a lot of breath work that I decided to work with, but a huge part of what you're talking about, I had these moments where I was exhaling and it was just kind of like, and I got a lot of real comfort and relief in those exhales. So after you do that once or twice and you realize, oh, I can play with that more, I would let it do its thing and not really even thinking about it that much. But whenever I would have those exhales that came out, I would play with that a little bit more, and I realized it felt really good. And what I was doing was tapping into that feeling of goodness and cultivating it even further to lock it into my core frequency. But part of my trip last night, like, there was a lesson there for me to learn, and I feel like I got it. It would be hard for me to give you that lesson via English, but it played with that idea of naturally relaxing, and those sounds that we make sometimes serve to heal us. It's almost like a different version of of a cat's purr or whatever. It's almost because it's not a purr itself per se, but it is a frequency sound, and it resonates physically with the body in a great vibration. So I wish that I could transfer, like download my experiences with the breathing last night just to you, so you could see how clearly what you're talking about I just went through, because it was nice and it felt like I was letting go, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the opposite of bracing. And like you're saying, you can, once you notice that you're doing it involuntarily, you can kind of lean into it and turn it into a variation of an or an But yeah, I just it's something that the 99.99999% of the 8 billion people stuck here just take for granted is breathing. They have no idea the power of breath. It is, I know, like, that's becoming like a concept that's more mainstream now, but it's still like, if there was one thing you needed to remember throughout the day, it's to focus on your breath and to follow your breath.
And so maybe it's because we've been hanging out and you've been really focused on this work a lot, the breath work, that it came out for me last night, because we've also talked about it a lot. But there was like the first 10 minutes, 20 minutes of my trip, which is about a 2-hour trip. It was all breath work. It was like the first 10 minutes was me entering the experience, finding my relaxation, and via the breath work. It was really the breath work that helped me navigate into my comfort space and relaxation space, so that even though I had these moments of darkness in the trip, like some pain down there that I was like, oh, I haven't seen that in a minute. Even though I saw that and I felt it, I was so relaxed, and I was navigating with my breath in such a way that I was able to say hello to the pain, hug it, give it a little bit of love without tapping into it, like by identifying with it. And I let it have its space. I let it try to tell me what it was trying to tell me. And the breath work helped me also stay kind of comfortable, even when I wasn't mentally all that comfortable meeting that pain. But yeah, just to wrap that up, the breath work last night for me was like critical. The first 10 minutes was like showing me you can use this breath work throughout your experience, and you probably want to do that. And sure enough, that's how I navigated most of it last night. And what I realized, this was another breakthrough that I had, and I've been having in like my most recent trips. As I use the breath work to navigate, I realized last night, typically when I'm like, oh, okay, I'm ready for another hit, let me light the bowl, I realized, oh no, I can breathe that hit. I can literally, once you get into this frequency with many psychedelics, instead of taking another dose, you can become the dose. You can become the state of being. And this is a clear lesson that it's finally clicking for me. The idea's been around my psyche for some time, but now it's clicking for me. And so last night, many times when I was like ready to hit the bowl again, I was like, well, I don't really need to. I can just kind of breathe my way into it. And bro, next thing you know, my visuals are more intense. I'm entering into more clarity, more divine consciousness just with the breath. So I'm learning more about that still to this day. And that just blows my mind, because my intro to breathwork was like 2010. And in the space of a few years, I felt like I had experienced all there was to really experience. And that's just not the case. It's infinite, just like everything else can be.
Just like everything else can be, it goes as deep as you want it to. With breath work, I just thought of this phrase, but like it makes sense to me. I kind of am just using it as like meditation on the go. It's a way to live your life and actually still be practicing mindfulness. Oh, next I put, and this goes hand in hand with abundance, with setting intention, taking that leap of faith and meeting the universe halfway, and then it will catch you every single time. This is applicable to everything. This is applicable to, let's just use real life examples of, like, let's say you want to quit your job because it's not fulfilling, it's not serving you, and you want to, if you do that, and if you put yourself out there and you have that actual faith is like belief without proof. So like if you know it, the universe, to be benevolent and to be abundant, if I'm doing something new as skating, and I just like literally have the bravery and the stillness, the universe will be like, yeah, you can pull that off. Here, let me give you that nudge of grace.
I really like how you broke that down. So this is something my sister's been going through. She does want to quit her job. She does want that shift in her life, career-wise, because it's not exactly what she thought it was going to be. Yeah, so I was talking to her about this because she wants to move from it, but in certain ways, she kind of feels a little bit stuck by the position she's in, with like having to need the money to do things. Yeah. And so what I told her, which has been a huge breakthrough in my life, is that so sometimes we want to do things, but we don't know how we can do them. And a lot of times as humans, it's like, okay, I want to travel. I don't have money. How can I do it? So what I was telling her is, you may not be able to get done exactly what you want to get done right now, but the way to get there, the way to shift to that reality, is simply you give yourself the intention, I want to shift there. But also the step 2 is that you do act on it to the best of your ability. So maybe you don't have enough money to travel from here to Spain right now, but you do have enough money to travel to a Spanish restaurant a state over, or maybe just a town over, or a day trip away. And so these things that you do is you act on that idea to the best of your ability. And what I was telling her is, oh, so sometimes the universe will see, okay, you're ready to walk down the mountain now. I see you taking a few steps. So why don't I just push you right off the edge? And the universe will do that time and time again. So where we get caught, though, as humans, is in trusting ourselves, is in trusting our universe, right? We get caught in the doubts of, well, I can't do it because of this. I'm limited because of that. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough energy. And that's where we trap ourselves. But literally the way to shift into that is to do it to the best of your ability. You might not be able to run the mile, but you can run 10 feet. So run that 10 feet, and you'll feel the universe helping you expand and shift to that spot. I really like how you broke it down, because it's really similar to how I broke it down for her.
I'm going to run with that example. Let's say I want to go to, you said Spain? So let's say that your sister wants to go to Spain, but she can't afford to travel right now, can't afford to take time off to travel right now. So let's say she goes to a Spanish restaurant. Let's say she's open because she's taking that first step. She's also following that momentum of being open, and she becomes acquainted with someone who actually has family, they're like second generation. They actually have family in their home country, and they have like a summer house, and you could stay for super cheap, and all you need to do is cover how to get there, and they can cook for you, and you can use and all this stuff and all the hospitality that would come with that. So that's to say that example is the abundance and setting intention, and you, for lack of a better way to put it, manifesting what you want out of life. You'll get the results. The step just may not look like what you had in your head. And if we're talking about like why to not take those leaps of faith, you're already living in the future mindset of the what ifs in a negative way. Why don't you spin it and use that like cliche, what if it all works out? Like, instead of like, oh man, what if I can't find a job? What if I find a job where I'm appreciated more and I'm compensated more and I have more free time to do the things I actually love? Like, what if instead of being like, oh, and let's bring it to skateboarding, like, oh man, like someone just did that so effortlessly, there's no way I could do that. What if I can do that so effortlessly if I just have faith that the universe has my back?
So this has really been helping me out lately, because I have been reminding myself to ask those questions. And what I realize is the more that I ask the positive side of the question, like, wait, what if that does work out with minimal effort and I do get to feel how I wanted to feel? The more I ask myself these positive sided questions, the more naturally they just happen. And that's why I really think like this is another thing physics is going to figure out with the intention studies. We're going to figure out that we can just naturally shift in the direction we want to, given we feel it and believe it actually, instead of just talking about it. But yeah, no, that's been like a day-to-day realization for me, and that's why I've been so positively focused lately, because it's been easy for me to remind myself to ask the good version of those questions, because they're happening all the time for me. But like I was saying, my early 20s, dude, I was so focused and stuck. I latched onto the negative side of these questions. What if I don't make it? What if I lose it all? What if I can't succeed with my art or my music? What if I'm not good enough? I was really just too or what if I'm good but I'm not worth enough money? I was too focused on the lack, and that is when you're operating from a fear-based place. And I did that for many years, and it ran a whole fucking toll on my psyche, and it made life a drag, right? But now it's like just a simple act of asking the positive side questions brings them around more often. That's kind of cool to me, because that doesn't really take a whole lot of effort.
Well, if everything is energetically a reflection, if you're sending out that message to the universe of like, hey, what if everything, is big bucks, no whammies, then that's probably what it's gonna like reply with. Yeah, the response is going to match the vibration of what has been sent out. So I'm not a fan. I'm not really familiar with his work, but I have listened to a couple concepts that he uses in his life. This is so convoluted. There's a guy and everybody knows named Conan O'Brien. He has two philosophical standpoints that I think are super helpful, and a couple things that you said off mic made me think of. So one is he tries to live his life, and the two concepts kind of go hand in hand. He tries to live his life like, whenever you let go of the ego and you're living from your center or whatever, you kind of lose all the highs and lows of the drama that is the narrative of your story of your ego. So, okay, cool. So instead of having those highs and lows, he calls it a low bass hum. And that kind of goes with the sound. It's like this low, steady rumble of centeredness that is just being at peace, which is joyful in and of itself. But you're not gonna have those dramatic ups and downs. It's gonna be more of like a mellow, subtle ebb and flow. Riding the wave of the flow of consciousness or what have you. The other concept you talked about how with TikTok, it will get your following exponentially quicker than if you're just underground and people might stumble onto it somehow on YouTube or Spotify or something. So he has this concept of I don't really know his story that well, but he was on TV in the 90s doing his own thing. Then I think he lost that spot and then he got another spot years later or something. But basically his advice to young artists is, imagine that your instrument of choice is the triangle. So everyone that's being authentic, just keep doing your specific idiosyncratic, your unique tone, your take on reality of you expressing yourself. You just keep ringing that triangle, and eventually the people that it resonates with will be drawn to it. So you keep doing your thing. You don't need to try to be affable or easily digestible. You just need to do what is in your heart, and it will shine through and people will be naturally drawn to it if you just keep at it. What did those two concepts, the low bass hum and the triangle, make you think of?
So the low bass hum is something I used to kind of identify with until I realized that's just a belief. It's just one way of looking at it and interpreting it, because that's how I kind of experienced when you move out of the ego, the show changes. It's not this dramatic show. The things that mattered in your ego don't matter from necessarily your true spirit or your true perspective of consciousness. And so, but what I realized a long time ago is I kind of also identify with things becoming less exciting and the lower hum from that ego perspective. But actually, no, what I experience is the opposite. Things become way more exciting for me. It's been that moving out of my ego, my life has been so exciting because I'm actually doing the things that are truer for me and make more sense instead of operating from the fear-based flight or fight or flight or survival frequencies. I'm moving from my higher self and things are way more ecstatic and I have so much more exciting stuff. But it's true that the negative drama is gone. That is true. But I guess what I'm realizing is that negative drama wasn't actually as exciting as it looked like it was. It feels exciting kind of, but once you get more into your true authentic self, you realize that's just more of a distraction. The negative drama was more of the ego. The hunger to feed the appetite of the ego was more of a distraction than me actually being my true self. So that's kind of how I feel about it these days. But I understand all the perspectives in between, and I think they're valid. It's just this is where I landed. And then the other point is completely true, and that you don't have to shift. You don't have to do things for other people. Absolutely no. You don't have to cater to other people at all. And I fully believe that at all. And so completely I believe that. And so I think if you feel like something stretches you in a way, it bends you the wrong way and it's not natural for you, then don't do it. That applies to everything in life. And that would apply to this situation with the clips of TikTok and long form versus short form. It would apply to that too. If you feel super strongly in not making any of the short form, that's fine. But yeah, we know what comes with it now in the world of actual real time consumption of content, I would say. And the only thing that really comes with it is it makes it a little bit harder for the masses to find you. But that again plays into who do you want to find you, right? Like who are you trying to reach? And so it all comes into personal taste. It's not a big deal at the end. But yeah, that's a good point, and I fully align with it. So where I am these days is that it's really natural for me splitting things like a long form into a short form is completely catering to myself. That is for me. So taking a long form podcast and splitting it into short form to help get it to people, for me, that's not catering to them, that's catering to me, because I know I'll be able to more quickly reach those people that I'm trying to reach. And then they can get, if they want to, then it's right there for them. So like that's my perspective with that case.
So they're not catering to people, like it's easier said than done to like stay authentic and unwavering, but like you're kind of playing yourself, and we all do this, but you're kind of playing yourself whenever you're like, whether it's putting on affect, whether it's only showing certain sides of yourself around certain people because it's like the most accessible for them, to understand you or to get along with them. Like how you only show, like, you basically, like, we've been conditioned from school and from our family to like only show our desirable qualities. That's why we have a shadow self, because all the things we think aren't accepted or understood, we just push down basically. But like it's such, where I'm going with this is, it's such a distortion to try to be anything other than your authentic, intuitive self around someone, because if you're trying to be more likable to someone, you're taking your view of what you think their view of you is. It's not even accurate. So it's like 3 times removed from reality. So like then it comes off, and like because we're animals and because we can sense things that are like not necessarily things that we can put into words or fully understand, like you can sense fear, you can sense when someone's being inauthentic. It'll just seem a little off. It'll just seem a little like, it does. It like makes you want to energetically, like it gives off the vibe you want to get away from them, because it doesn't feel safe, because like they're uneasy, they're not at ease with themselves, and you can feel that. And like that's why, as long as you're being authentic, we might not just be meant to be like best buds, but at the same time, like I can respect you and you have dignity, and I can love you unconditionally and have compassion for you if you're being authentic. If not, like you're just stuck on the side of the river, and I'll meet you halfway whenever we can actually meet each other halfway.
This year I made a conscious decision finally to tell my friends and keep that shit over there. Don't bring that over here, because I have friends that are at times emotionally, they can feel like they need my attention and emotion, so it feels for me emotionally draining. And it's because they're like, I'm suffering, I need you to help me out of my suffering, I need you to be there for me, I need you to help me deal with my suffering. And what I've realized is, no, dude, fucking keep that suffering far as fuck away from me as you can, because you're choosing that shit mostly. I mean, part of it right, part of it is like natural, but like I was saying when my trip last night, you see it there, the suffering exists, it's within you, but you have to choose to identify with it. You have to choose whether it does make sense for you or if it doesn't. And so what I see with my friends now is that they are choosing to go through this experience and use the suffering as a transformation, and that's fine. But I don't have time for that. I'm so checked out of suffering because I've realized it's just not that relevant. Mostly there are times when it really can be, to help you look at some things, to help you address things that maybe you repressed or whatever. But no, I've been telling my friends, like, I love you, and if you want to hang out or whatever, I got time for you, but I'm not gonna go swimming in your ocean of suffering. That's your ocean. I'm not getting wet. I don't have any desire to even dip a foot in, but I love you, and I'll hang out with you. I'll be there with you, but I can't walk your hand through this experience for you. It's not my job. And even if you wanted me to and would let me, I couldn't do it. It's all on you. So it kind of seems like tough love in times of like crisis for these people. But it's funny. As soon as I started making this choice, finally, I have them not calling me with their bullshit. You know what I'm saying? I finally don't. It doesn't feel like a hassle when someone calls me and they're like trying to unload emotionally on me. Because if that happens now, it's easy for me to be like, oh, I don't have time to talk to you right now. I love you, but I gotta go. So I now am. So what I'm saying is, it's helped me regulate my own time and my own emotional availability just by deciding like, yo, I recognize you're suffering, but I can't help you. I love you, and that's it.
So this idea of friends being stuck in their own way and not being able to see outside of it, like when we have the privilege, or I don't know if you would call it a privilege because it took work to get here, but like we are coming from a place of being outside of it, so it's so much easier to see it when you're not in it. When it's so murky whenever you're actually in it. But I will say, once you're out of it, you can accept this as fact, not subjective. Like, there's a difference between pain and suffering. The difference is pain is a sensation that's happening right now. Suffering is what happens when you cling to that pain. It's whenever you hold on to it and you ruminate on it and you don't want to let it go. And then after a while, you start to identify with the suffering. And you start to say, instead of leaving the sentence with the two words, I am, period, just I am, because that leaves it open ended. Like, I am everything you see, I am. Like, I am. But, like, then you finish, you say, like, I am sad. Okay, I am sad is what's happening right now. Then after a while, it's I am a sad person. then it beca- then it's so easy to go, my life is sad. This is a sad existence, and then it seems hopeless, and because you're not letting it go. Like I've had friends in my life. I've had a couple friends in my life, and sometimes things don't hit you until years later. Like they said the most simplest phrase and the most cliche thing. Said they could see the hurt in my eyes. They said, "Let it go." And at the time, you're so self-important. Like suffering, long-term suffering borders on masturbatory narcissism. Like it's literally like so self-involved. Like zoom out. That's all I need to tell you is zoom the fuck out. And yes, you are insignificant, but that should be empowering, not disheartening.
Yeah, I think that last bit is very well said. In the book that I've been reading, there's a chapter where one of the authors, has a really difficult experience in trying to process her relationship with all that is, being like God, the concept of God, and herself, and the loving God over the universe. But part of her ultimate great realization is that she views the world through this dark gray lens of suffering and death, and there's beauty too, but she's like focused on all of this darkness and grayness. But she realizes over the course of a week that it's because she's identified with this pain and this negative kind of energy, and so she's cultivated it, and that's why she keeps tapping into it over and over again. And it was at the end of the week, it was a simple shift in her being of deciding to focus on the other side of the coin that gave her that freedom, and really and for her it put into perspective like 50 years of her life, because that was a huge part of her identity, was this dark, cold part of herself that she calls the shadow, and she never fully integrated until later on in life. But I think all that you said was really, really well said.
All right, I feel good about that. Let's end it there. Peace.